Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, my friends in Europe. Obviously, it's Monday. There were big events over the weekend, a lot to unpack. The United States dropped strategically bombs on three major nuclear sites in Iran. And obviously, over the weekend, markets were freaking out as we come in today. The market is a little bit more calm, a little bit more relaxed. It's actually up. Volatility is coming in. To unpack what has happened and give us the scenarios that could potentially come out of this, and to share three stock ideas that he believes are going to be big winners out of the events that just occurred. Is our own man of both K Street and Wall Street. He is the most connected man that you will meet. He is the finest graduate of Villanova University ever. He is Francis J. Gregory. Frank, thank you for being here.
Morning, sir.
A lot happened over the weekend. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. One of the things I was kind of taken aback by watching the news was how surprised a lot of the military analysts were that appear on, Fox and CNN and MSNBC and CBS, all the major news networks. They were taken aback. So why don't you unpack for us briefly what happened over the weekend, and then I want to talk about kind of what's next.
Yeah, I think everyone was taken aback. I was too a little bit. You knew it was a pretty strong possibility that this was going to occur. We didn't think it was going to occur this quickly, particularly given the rhetoric that Trump has always said. He ran heavily on being the non-war president. He ran heavily on being the conflict resolution president, not the conflict-causing president. And certainly it's been very telling watching my friends on the libertarian side, particularly the ones that jumped on board with Trump off the RFK train and really pushed. I've got some very good friends who were instrumental in getting RFK behind Trump in the election. And they're just despondent at the moment that this occurred. I mean, it really flew in the face of what he had, his rhetoric going in and what he had stated to a lot of people. So it definitely caught folks by surprise. Is it now? All right, that's that. Is it necessarily, a bad thing? I don't think it's a good thing. You never want war. You never want conflict. However, a nuclear armed Iran is certainly not something the world needs. And, they were getting, very, very close. I think Marco Rubio said it best on one of the talk shows over the weekend. You don't enrich uranium to almost 70% if it's for purely commercial purposes. You don't bury your facilities 300 feet underground in reinforced bunkers if it's purely for civilian purposes. And the fact is, most countries, when they get to that point of 70% uranium enrichment, it's a very quick leap and jump to full enrichment, and that made Iran a very dangerous and unstable actor, particularly with the current regime in place. And they've said very emphatically they're not necessarily they would not avoid using these weapons if they had them, particularly against Israel. So we jumped in. The White House described the results of this as, quote, very successful, complete obliteration. Now, do we have any confirmation on that as of yet? No. We've all seen some video coming out of there. It looked pretty devastating, but you never know. We had, that's why, the U.S. was the only one with the weapons used. The B-2s are the only bombers that could carry the weapons used, and that's why those the strikes occurred as they did. So aftermath, Iran is continuing its attacks on Israel. Obviously, we're waiting, here in the U.S. to see if there's any retaliation on this side. Trump is certainly talking a lot of rhetoric that, if any retaliation occurs, that'll just be the end times for Iran. But I don't know that Iran cares, particularly its leadership that is very ideologically driven. And if they feel that it's end times, it's going to be their end times. So, we'll see what occurs.
Now, I know you talk to some very clandestine people. We're not allowed to mention names or what they do or how you know them. But you do talk to some people that are very ingrained and embedded in this environment and have deep understanding of what's happened. What is the feedback you're hearing from some of the clandestine people that you talk to?
Yeah, there were two big themes in speaking to people, and everyone's got their own biases, and people are still getting their arms around this. One was regime change. So, is this going to be the foundation for regime change in Iran, and is that necessarily a good thing? You always have to look at that. There's always these laws of unintended consequences. You saw what happened with a lot of the Arab Spring movements a few years ago. They didn't really pan out like we had hoped. So you start looking at will regime change occur? I think a lot of people are very hopeful that we will get some grassroots uprising. The populace of Iran, which is very pro-West, very pro-Israel even, and very pro these movements. You saw a lot of marches in the streets, supporting these attacks, which is unheard of in that environment. So they're hoping for regime change, and you want to see it as a rising up of the people, a taking back of their country, and maybe even the Shah's family's itching on coming back, and maybe you see that. The fear that I'm hearing is, what I kept hearing is there's no guarantees on what will change, right? One of the things that's a concern is there's actually a class of people in Iran called the Bazari class, and these are the economic elites who already maintain deep connections with the current government out of necessity. But they've got super large networks inside the country. They dominate the country's commercial life, and so while the clerical hold on the country could be sidelined, it's not necessarily favorable for democracy. What I've been told is there's a fear that Iran would risk becoming a Russian-style, kleptocracy ruled by a handful of very wealthy, entrenched elites, hostile to the West, but more interested in profit than ideology. So it kind of goes back, to the old Reagan era, the Jeane Kirkpatrick view of the world that, I'd rather deal with a dictator than an ideologue. Dictators can be manipulated and controlled. So you kind of move back into that situation. Certainly the upside is still, if there is some type of, regime change, you get that, an expansionist theocracy armed with nuclear ambitions sidelined. And that's the positive. The other thing that people are looking at, heavily is, which Iran was threatening, do they shut down the Strait of Hormuz? And certainly, Mark, from an oil standpoint, that could throw a lot of things into a tizzy, if you will. But, is it really in their best interest? The U.S. gets approximately 12% of its oil from countries that ship through the Strait of Hormuz, just 12%. That can be made up for in other areas. The ones that get the most are
China,
and
India.
You're not going to see Iran make moves to shut down those partners, particularly China, which has been very supportive of them. I don't think you're going to see that Strait of Hormuz shut down. So that fear, if you will, that was out there is probably exaggerated. It was, it's one of the few blustery talking points that the Iranian regime can throw on the world stage to try and influence opinion and movement. So I think that's, the general prevailing view there is the Strait of Hormuz will not be shut down, and not necessarily for, two things. One, it doesn't have the impact that you might think it would on the U.S., but two, it would actually be hurting their key partners more than anybody else.
Now, I want to hit on one more important thing, because I was talking, my friend across the street is a graduate of the University of Tehran. He's an engineer. He's brilliant. So I've been getting some insight into his thoughts. And he was telling me that on one hand, he's cheering on these. I'm sure this is not everybody, but he is very happy that the U.S. did what it did. But on the other hand, he's obviously very worried about his family and his friends and escalation. And the two things he was worried about is, like, one, Saudi Arabia comes out out of this looking like the regional power in the entire Middle East, out of the Arab states. And he was fearful that Iran could, even though it's Persian, could be, start dominated by, could get overly influenced by some of the Arab nations. There is a major difference between Iran and the rest of the Middle East in terms of who the populace is and how educated they are.
Yes.
Can you just kind of briefly break that down for everybody, and then we'll get into some stock picks?
No, it's an old Sunni Shiite problem, right? And certainly, don't forget. I mean, Iran, Iraq, that war lasted how many years? Almost a decade.
Yeah,
not more. So there have been regional conflicts there for a very long time. Remember, people don't refer to themselves. I bet your friend really doesn't even refer to himself as Iranian. He's Persian. Yeah. And this is it's a 6,000-year-old civilization that has been around for a very long time. So not as entrenched from, with the exception of the current leadership. Historically not as theocratic as a lot of the other Middle East nations tend to be. So I think there is a fear there, but Saudi is an interesting one. I think the U.S. will, I don't think that the U.S. is going to allow Saudi to have that direct influence. If it's soft influence, obviously yes, that could be a problem. But keep in mind, Mark, the people the people in Iran have been really fighting for just freedom for a long time, and they've been under the thumb of a highly dictatorial, theocratic regime. They want out, and really a lot of that's being driven by women who used to have full equal rights in the country prior to the late 70s, and they want it back. And you also hit on something very, very important. This is actually a highly educated society. And very smart people. A lot of folks come here from Iran, become doctors. These are people coming into the U.S. and taking on very white collar, high power jobs when they get here. This is a educated society. It is not. Just look. I mean, if anybody has ever really done it, pull up a picture of Tehran. It looks like any Western city. It is modern. It is high rises. It is not a what you see when you look at some other areas of the Middle East. Tehran is an incredibly modern looking city.
Yeah, and just to put to your point, my friend said the IRGC are looking for Israeli spies by searching cars when the real spies are their children and their families. Yeah. So if you want to know how Israel got there, it's because Iran's own people were working with the Israelis to get assets into the country.
You think Israel just walked into Iran on its own and built a drone factory inside of Iran for years that no one knew about without the help of the populace?
Yes. And then his other point was the fact that we flew in on a 37-hour mission. Iran never fired a single shot at our bombs. We dropped how many tons of bombs and got out, and not a single shot was fired. What message does that send to our friends at the PBOC and our friend Vladimir Putin about the capabilities of the United States when it comes to lethality?
And by the way, very, very targeted, very precise. Collateral. There's always collateral damage, but minimized to the greatest extent possible, particularly with the size of the ordnance being used. And by the way, the Israelis did the same thing. The Mossad was very targeted in their initial strikes. Collateral damage. They really kept an eye on the civilian population.
All right, so there you have that. That I'm sure as you have. Well, if you have questions, I will come back and with Frank and answer them at the end. But you're not here just to hear about Frank's analysis of what's happening and what's next. Obviously, we're hoping for no escalation and some sort of peace. But you have some stock ideas that you are interested in. You think could present some real opportunities over the next few months. I want to start with some of the microcaps. If we want to share my screen here. You gave me 2 microcaps. These are small companies that maybe that may be flying under the radar. The first one is Red Cat Holdings.
Yep.
This is an FPV drone and military grade drone systems.
Oh yeah. And by the way, we do hold this in cap gains, Mark, just so everybody knows.
Okay.
So
it's currently valued at $676 million. It trades about $7 a share. Tell us about ARCAT.
Yeah, no, ARCAT is a holding company. So they've got a number of different, they're a public company that has been acquiring private upstarts. And so they've got, one of the things coming out of the military right now is you're seeing a lot of very cutting edge tech coming from small startup private companies. ARCAT's been acquiring some of those. Big one is called Teal Drones. And Teal has some nice contracts with the military for their short reconnaissance surveillance program. So this is the go-to drone for the military when they're doing, if you think about, in the movies when you got a drone flying through, a little city area to, check out what's going on before troops move in. So that's what, Teal drones are very popular for. And, they've done very well with that. ARCAT did, it dropped a little bit. The reason for that drop, though, Mark, is because they did a $45 million contingency offering. So they did a little stock offering last week, and that caused the price to drop a little bit. Big thing for ARCAT is they've got great connectivity in the military. They're getting good contracts. Is do they execute on the fulfillment of those contracts? Once you can get these contracts, you still have to get the people on the front lines to buy them. So will they execute? That's the one big risk for in my mind with ARCAT. But they're small, nimble, highly volatile stock. Andrew and I have done pretty well in cap gains trading this thing. We've done multiple trades around this.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And again, in cap gains, this is one you have on, but you're using option trades. We like it as a stock.
Yep.
But if you want the option trades, you have to be a member of cap gains. Now, here's another one that is a micro cap. You had so many interesting names here. It was hard to choose until talking this morning, and you told me which ones you were most excited about. And that is Comtech Telecom. This is a $2.50 stock. Current valuation is only $65 million. So this is an early name. And
this is a company that, they're doing satellite space communications, emergency communications. So it's a tech firm, more than anything. And they're particularly with a lot of space wars going on right now, if you will. Call it geotension. This is a stock that I think could probably do pretty well, and it's as much a global telecom, security stock, globally. I really didn't look at this one as much as for the Middle East, but I think it's going to get some play because of what's going on in the Middle East. But fundamentally, the Middle East really has nothing to do with it. So I liked it for that reason. So the fundamentals are away from the Middle East, but the Middle East could drive some story around it.
So it's a good company, and what's happening in the Middle East is basically like icing on the cake and the candles. If it pulls dollars out of that, that's going to really cause the stock to take off. Yes. So you like the stock already, and now this opportunity that doesn't appear to even have started to materialize yet could really push the stock. This was as high as $5 back in 2025. Again, we like the stock, but if you want the options, you have to be a member of capital gains.
High risk, high reward. It's a good one.
So that's part of the reason why we like options here, especially on names like this. Now, so those are the micro caps. So these are companies worth less than $1 billion. On your small caps, you gave me several different names. The one that you wanted to talk about this morning was Big Bear AI, BBAI, not Build-A-Bear, but Big Bear AI. Currently worth $1.16 billion, trading $3.98 on the stock chart. You can see this thing got up to $10 back in February. So it can move. And if you ignore kind of this pop in February, there is a nice trend here. I mean,
this is an AI analytics contractor. Now, here's the fun fact about these guys. They are linked to the DOD and the CIA. So there's been some questions around whether or not this is merely a front company that is moving dollars around under the guise of being a legit AI analytics firm. So I would say in today's world, could that help them get a bump? Yes, it could. But are they fundamentally necessarily the greatest company in the world? No, because no one knows a whole lot about them. So, they came on my radar just because of that. We've been watching them. It's one of those names that has been floated around. People always kind of talk about it behind the scenes, but guess what? Front companies exist. There's a lot of them. I mean, there's, people believe Palantir is a front company, given, even despite its size. So, they do exist, and they do actually sometimes produce product. But, if you think, some of the others we've talked about are volatile, potentially this one could be huge. But I also like the potential upside.
Okay. Now, front companies, that mean they're doing something else behind the scenes, and this is the way to get to basically give cover for what they're doing behind the curtain.
So you've heard of black budgets, and you've heard of things that you talk about, movies written about in the newspaper, and sometimes there's pockets of money, and those pockets of money need to get from point A to point B, but no one really wants to admit that that movement is occurring from point A to point B. So you might have a company that gets a contract at point B that does stuff. And so that way there's a reason for that money to move to point B from point A. I'll just leave it at that.
Understood. Understood. All right. You gave me a couple other.
And it happens more frequently than people want to admit. So.
And folks, I want you to know he sent me 9 names. We're only hitting on 4 of them. For those of you in Cap Gains, you're going to be hearing the other ones and going through the other ones with Frank and Andrew later this week.
Tomorrow, by the way, 2 p.m. 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Yes. So you are going to want to definitely be there, because I'm looking at several other names that look extremely interesting here, especially in that small cap sector. Now, on the mid cap to getting bigger, this is one probably people have heard of, but they maybe don't know actually what they do, and that is Kratos Defense and Security, KTOS. This is one you put on my radar when it was $17. It's currently over 40. Folks, when Frank says put this one on your radar, I go and buy 100 shares, and it's worked out pretty darn well. So talk to me about Kratos and what they do, and what, I mean, it's definitely a big winner today, up 6.5%. Why is this one so hot?
And by the way, Mark, this is an interesting one, because this one, why I like it, my thesis on why I like it has actually changed from when I first introduced it to you. And it is why I think it is popping. I'll get into it really quick. Originally, what they came on my radar screen because they were one of the companies that the government gave a contract to build what's called a pilotless wingman. So think of Maverick and Goose take off from the aircraft carrier. Another plane comes up and it's their wingman, but it's not Iceman, it's AI. And this is an AI driven plane, and maybe there's more than one, there could be a handful of them. And they are now independently flying as the wingman, not just to cause diversions, but actually now, if there's ever an engagement, they're building to a point where these planes will fly and fully engage on their own and fly just like another wingman. Whole point being limit threats to actual humans, engage. And so KTOS has been one of the leaders. They have landed and taken off with out pilots from aircraft carriers. Pretty cool stuff, doing it in conjunction with some other big defense contractors. But the reason they're on my radar now, with again, coming out of what just happened, is what was the big news? Going back, 10 days ago, Israel struck Iran. Iran retaliated initially with just drones, but then they sent in, and the drones were not effective at all, used up a lot of Iron Dome, but then they sent in another type of weapon that did in fact have some success striking inside of Israel. What was that weapon?
I don't know. What was that weapon?
Hypersonic missiles. So hypersonic missiles are missiles that are going 5, 6, 7, times the speed of sound, 5,000 miles an hour. I mean, these things are, they are crazy, very hard to, counter, very effective. Israel did underestimate the capabilities, I think, a little bit. That's just Frank Gregory talk of what Iran had. But anyway, KTOS is one of the U.S. leaders in hypersonic technology. So that's why that is why I'm looking at them today.
Interesting. And, I believe AI right now is currently beating humans in simulated dogfights, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, they do. They do pretty well. And there was and the other thing, one of the reasons you tie into that, Mark, is the new defense budget. If it's, if Congress gets its act together on the budgets as a whole, has a large allocation for hypersonic technology. So KTOS could be the beneficiary of some budget movement.
All right, and this is another one. Do you guys currently have this in capital gains? But is this one that is?
No, we've traded in the past. We don't have it currently. But
yeah, I'm looking at the cap gains portfolio, and yeah, you closed KTOS on the 13th for a 62% gain. You closed RCAT for a 75% gain. You've done KTOS for 33%. You've had KTOS for another 46%. KTOS for 106%. RCAT for 5,400%.
That was good.
RCAT for 1,600%. Folks, these are not made up. These are real returns. And it just goes to show you that you guys are using your knowledge and intelligence and your web of information to pull in names that are off the radar and helping your subscribers to make some money. If you would like to join now, we've got a very special offer. If you want to join Capital Gains, we have a very special offer for you guys to join. $4 for a month. Think about that you're getting knowledge and expertise of Frank, and you're also getting Andrew's 30 plus years of trading experience. We want everybody to be able to trade this and be able to get their way through.
I feel so cheap.
Yeah, we want it. Well, this is a time where I think a lot of people need guidance, and they need someone like you to help get through this. I know I do. Saturday, when this all went down, I got on Slack and said, Frank, I need you Monday. And you said, I'll be there, Mark. And that's why we want to put this offer out to you. $4. You can join Capital Gains. Your next session is tomorrow, correct? At
2 p.m. Eastern.
What time? 2 p.m.
2 p.m. Eastern.
All right. So so everybody join. There's the link. We do have a few questions. Bo says, is it true that the U.S. does not have hypersonic missiles?
No, we've got deployed and have or two, not necessarily the same thing, but no, we've got pretty good hypersonic technology. It's more the do we have the defense against hypersonic missiles? That's the more concerning issue, and that's not where we are. I'd like to see us build up the defensive aspect of that.
Okay. Let's see. Do you think it's too late to get in KTOS? I mean, it is up, but what kind of upside do you consider that? Do you think this is going to eventually be a large? Right now, it's a mid cap. Do you think it will eventually be a large cap? I mean, is this like another Palantir?
Yeah, I like KTOS for the long term. And remember, Mark, you guys are the ones who have taught me about options trading and how much money you can make trading options. I was always a buy and hold guy. And so when I look at stocks, to me, I'm looking at the long term. Are these things that I want to, own in a portfolio? Keep in mind, I came from the mutual fund world where that's just how you did it, right? Didn't do any of the fun stuff. So I always look at, is this a solid fundamental, play, for me, if I was just going to hold it for the long, the long run. So, yeah, I like it a lot. And, money, as we said just a few minutes ago, money's going to come out of the defense budget to this company.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen that. We have that hasn't hit balance sheets, that hasn't hit orders, that hasn't hit anything yet. So, there is some, pent up leverage, if you will, that's in that will this company will get. Yes, it's probably popped on the rumors. People can look at the budgets and see that, they will benefit, but you haven't seen the benefit to the sheets yet.
All right. Frank, thank you for coming with us. Do you have any closing thoughts about the events over the weekend and what you kind of see happening in the next couple of weeks? What would you say is the best case scenario, and what would be what's your kind of standard scenario, your kind of standard base case, and then is there a real worst case scenario here?
I mean, worst case scenario, we'll start there. Worst case scenario is, Russia or China decide to enter a wider proxy war after seeing what just occurred. And that could create conflict. Certainly there's the fear of, some type of, terrorist retaliation, both in the Middle East, potentially here, keeping an eye on that. I think, obviously people are on high alert here and across the Middle East. I think best case scenario for me is something clicks somewhere with the leadership over there, and they say this is not worth a wider conflict. Let's, Trump called it. This was not an act of war. This was an act of forcing peace. It's an interesting spin on words, but I'm not going to debate that. But I hope he's right. Let's hope that this, when Iran fully assesses the impact to its aggressive infrastructure, and hopefully they say, all right, you know what, this has gone on long enough. That would be the best case scenario. I'm not necessarily, if I'm a bet man, I'm not putting a whole lot of money on that, but that's what I would hope.
All right. Cool. And people are asking us for some projections on oil prices, some other deep stuff there. I'm going to ask you. We'll do. I'm sure you guys dig into that stuff at during capital gains. I'm going to tell you guys, spend the $4 to join capital gains, and a lot of your other questions will get answered. Frank, thank you so much for giving us your time and knowledge and sharing your insights here. We appreciate your stock picks, your stock ideas, KTOS, RCAT, Comtech Telecommunications, Big Bear AI. Again, he shared 5 other names with me that he's going to be talking about in capital gains tomorrow as well. Take this opportunity to join Frank and Andrew for just $4. If there was ever a time to jump on board, this is the time. If you have questions, give us a call, 888-872-3301. You can shoot us an email at support@optionpit.com. So for Francis J. Gregory, someone mentioned the Pope went to Villanova, so I think you've been displaced as the finest graduate. So we're going to call Frank the second finest graduate after the Pope.
There were a few before and after me, I think, Mark. Yeah. Yourself included.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So for Villanova's finest, Frank Gregory and Mark Sebastian, I am Mark Sebastian, your only option. We hope you have a great day. God bless America, and God bless the people of Iran. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks.